Shine Campus, what's going on? Welcome to our Sunday Strength. Today we're going to be talking about how to forgive and why forgiveness is important. In different scenarios, I talk a lot about forgiveness, and I don't know that I've talked about it um, in our Sunday Strength before. So I'm kind of excited to give you guys this information because a lot of times what happens is we get heavy hearts and our lives turn heavy and our bodies got to pay for the forgiveness that we're not doing. And so I think um, if we're able to talk about this, then it can hopefully relieve you of some of the burdens that you might be experiencing in your life because you haven't got to that. So that's the whole goal is I don't care about the thing or the person that's hurt you or harmed you or put you in a bad spot. I care about you and I want to give you a different kind of interaction and opportunity to do your life. Okay, and so this is the undoing of that. That's what we're talking about today. How do we undo um, some of those difficult things? Okay, so here's the thing: when is forgiveness needed? I think if we go with that first question, if we look at that, um, well, anytime that you could think about when you feel like somebody has done you wrong or somebody's actually done wrong to you, we need to start looking at what forgiveness is. Okay, and if we can start looking in those cases in those situations, you might not even be using the word forgiveness. To be honest, you could just be using another word, but somehow you're holding on to what has happened, right? And sometimes people will have this saying. There's a famous saying that's I think it goes, "I may forgive, but I might not forget." And the truth is that yeah, forgetting is not what we're discussing. In fact, what's important about that is the body does have a memory. So the body, something happens. Um, it could be a car accident, right? And you're mad at somebody because they weren't paying attention. Um, and it could be a hard thing because you're going to remember that every time there's a trigger kind of situation, and so your body does have a way of just bringing it up. That's not the same thing as you not forgiving them. That's just your body's memory. That can happen even in an argument. Let's say that you're arguing with a family member that you love, and um, and everything, you feel like, man, I've tried to forgive but I can't stop remembering what's going on. Well, it's not about that you're always choosing to do that. We'll go over some things to help you not choose to do that, but sometimes it's just part of what the body does to remember. Hey, you're not in a safe situation. This reminds us, right? And again, we'll go over some things that will help us with that. But understand there's a difference between our body remembering and us doing forgiveness. Us doing forgiveness is us trying to carry a weight um, that we don't have control over. And so, what's the purpose of us not forgiving? And I think that that's going to help us make the distinguishing mark between whether we're forgiving or just remembering, right? So, the purpose of us not forgiving is that it's our way as people really to create some kind of punishment so that we can shape behaviors of other people or even ourselves, right? Because remember that um, there's two places where forgiveness could be necessary. It could be forgiving yourself for something that you've done or imposed, or somehow there's a scenario that's gone on that you haven't forgiven yourself for, or forgiving somebody or something else, right? So there's two areas that we can look at. So the purpose of us not forgiving a lot of times is that we're trying to somehow create a punishment factor or control factor in order to shape the behaviors of others and ourselves. Now, I know that the initial thing is like to have an argument about what my definitions are. But instead of coming up with the argument or having the definitions that maybe that you've had before, I'm inviting you to put these in your life first. Give it about 2 months, and you'll see how it helps you to unwind different scenarios. So, who am I trying to punish, or how is that working? I don't feel like I'm trying to punish anybody. Uh, so, if we think of it more like the only way for me to get somebody to do something different is for me to treat them a certain kind of way, right? That's what our body goes to, and punishment has been here um, for as long as, in history wise, there's always been some kind of form of punishment to try to create connection or correction of behaviors. And so we have it in us too, right? It's just not that. It's just that forgiveness and not forgiving are not the avenues that we want to try to use to restructure behaviors for ourselves or for other people. So the idea um, of us using for not forgiving as a punishment is really useful. I want you guys to go back and review what I just said and sit down and start thinking about, like, what is it? Like, how am I creating those kinds of scenarios? What's happening when I'm not forgiving, right? And so you'll be able to come up with your own validation of that definition. All right. So, what is the cost of not forgiving? And so, this is a really important thing, because if we're willing to look at what the cost is of not forgiving, then we start to understand the reason that we need to figure out, okay, how do I forgive? Right. So, the challenge is that the weight of the caring and the remembering to be able to punish and to be able to interact with another person a certain way because we haven't forgiven, that focus and awareness that we do takes away all of the things that we want to have in our hearts that will actually allow us to move forward in our life, right? The thing that has happened to us, and this is really important, the thing that has happened to us um, is difficult, right? The thing that has happened to us probably um, left us devastated, hurt, um, was probably unfair. It was probably all of those things. And so, how do we fix that? How do we get to a different space with that? The only way for us to get to a different space with that is for us to be able to focus on the right kinds of things, have the right kind of awareness about the places that we want to be in, and start growing those things. Unfortunately, when we're not forgiving, or we're embedded in trying to set up some kind of scenario and make somebody else pay for what they did, that takes so much energy away from us that we're not able to focus on the things that would give us the peace back in our heart, which is ultimately the place that we want to be in. So the cost is really high because of all the tearing that it does at us. And the more we're not conscious of what's going on, the more likely that on the inside it's really um, scraping away at our minds and our hearts and the life momentum that we want to try to have. Okay. So, if that's the case, if we can't use not forgiving, if we got to take that out of our repertoire of fixing other people's behaviors, how do we correct people's behaviors and make them do the right thing to us, either in the future or even right now? How does that happen? Well, I do have a saying that I use, which is, I don't need anybody to do something different for me to be okay, right? In fact, I'm the one who has to do something different for me to be okay. And if you adopt that saying, it's going to help you immensely, because then you start understanding, like, my battle isn't with trying to get other people to do different behaviors. I might have to switch up my behaviors. Like, I might have to remove myself from a certain scenario. I might have to create a different kind of environment. And if you're in a relationship, you might have to create a different kind of environment. Um, there might have to be some other switch that you make that's going to give you the best possible opportunity to be able to create something else. And then I always tell people too is that we teach people how to treat us. And that doesn't mean that we teach people to treat us how to treat us like we tell them, hey, you could only do this and that's what I'm going to allow. Instead, it's we teach people how to treat us based on how we treat ourselves. And so some of what can be corrected, because there's certain things that cannot be corrected. There are people who are in this world who are absolutely hurting and not willing to take care of that hurt that they're experiencing. So some cannot be corrected. But for the people who are in your life that you care about, that you love, that you want around you, for those people, the opportunity is that you start taking care of yourself and treating yourself a certain way. And they'll see that and pick up on that and be influenced heavily by the way that you interact with that. The other piece, if there's somebody again that's close to you that you care about and you love and you want to keep them in your life, love is a winner for everything, right? And so if we show up in that kind of way, those scenarios get reciprocated. Okay. there are a lot of times where forgiveness is necessary for strangers or for people who will, we won't ever see again, or um, people who are not going to be in our life constantly. So just know that's not always the case, that we're going to be in a situation where we care about somebody and we want to try to keep them in our life. All right. So there isn't a way for us to really correct people and try to make them do the right thing in order for us to forgive them. That's not what's on the table here, right? We're talking about doing away with the idea that we're going to make people do the right thing, and being more focused on, look, I need to create a space in my heart that's peaceful. I need to create a space in my mind and in my movement in life that means that I can focus on the right things. That's what we're talking about. So, how do we do the forgiveness? There's a lot of pieces to doing the forgiveness piece, but the first thing you have to do is say, "Look, I understand what the wrong is. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. Like, I fully get what was done wrong, and how I'm feeling because of it. It will, a lot of times, things that hurt us won't ever make mental sense. Like, it won't be a 2 + 2 = 4. A lot of times it's emotional sense that it makes, so it will never pan out or line up, or um, give us a peace of mind to try to find out an understanding of why. So instead, the best thing that we can do is say, look, I get that I'm hurt, and these are the emotions that I have that is connected to what has gone on. So I just want you to know that part. That's the first step of us being able to forgive. And then I want you to untangle with the behaviors that happen. And so, whatever has happened, somehow you're entangling it. And what that looks like is, a lot of times the things that are hurtful to us remove something from our life that we cherished, or is calling up something that is hurtful to us, or some other kind of way that we're tangled inside of that scenario. And what I want to be able to do is untangle with that situation, or allowing that person or that thing to be um, a part of our life. So I want to be able to say, look, whatever happened in that situation, that was that person's thing. That was that situation's thing. It's not a part of, or doesn't need to be a part of, who I am. And so it's really important that we untangle with that situation as much as possible. Okay. So, what this gives us, and this is what we're trying to move to, we're trying to recreate our focus so that we can move closer to the indifference space. So, even us hating a situation, and this is part of the reason that we're trying to do a forgiveness scenario, because even me hating a scenario or trying to punish a scenario creates this interaction for me inside that scenario. The movement that we want to make is actually to indifference. And so if I can get to indifference, then I'm going to be in a space where my heart can experience something else. And so indifference says, one way or the other, I don't need to make somebody pay. I don't need to be the one to pay. It doesn't have to be any kind of interaction, right? So the goal is to get to that piece. How do you move to the indifference? The best way to move to the indifference is start creating a different kind of focus in your life on where you want to be, right? And so if you don't feed that reality scenario that happened, like for instance, let's say that somebody called me a bad name, right? And I stay on that, and I constantly look at, why did that happen? What's happened? That person always does that. That feeding of the scenario just creates a situation where I'm more embedded in that scenario than I ever want to be, right? Um, Instead, I need to be able to say, look, I need to feed into the reality of where I want to be, right? So if you can move your focus, so shift your focus to, where do you actually want to be in your life? This will start informing the movement that you have to make. And so you won't have to hold on to um, the thing that has happened to you. Okay. It's really important that at the beginning of this, I said there's two places. One is we need to sometimes forgive ourselves, and the other one is forgiving other people or other things. And it's really important that we look at both of those situations, go back and rewind this so that you can see what areas you have to break down in, and get to the root of what's going on. if you're able to create a situation of forgiveness, I promise you, you'll have space in your heart to be able to do other things, and you'll feel a huge weight off yourself, off your shoulders, just to be able to live your life and do something different. You don't need to punish others. Go ahead and start forgiving. And if you have any questions, please reach out. All right, you guys, we'll talk to you soon. Enjoy your Sunday.